This is the DRS train.
A fake anthem for a fake country. I'm Peter Brook. I'm joined by Nav F1 and Nedzo's F1 Gridbox, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. So, I don't know about you two, but I don't think I've ever felt so deflated after a race before, other than at this circuit 4 years ago, maybe. Just another very frustrating day for Formula One. We've had this for years now with controversy over wet weather and the tyres, and particularly the conduct of race control, and I'm really getting tired of it. And at the end of the day, we started the race 90 minutes later than we should, and a potential modern classic ended up just being a complete dud, didn't it, Nav?
Yeah, well, firstly, your rendition of the Belgian anthem just made me think of that clip in 2023 of whoever the hell they got to sing the anthem in front of the drivers, and this heavily costumed person, and it's just Alonso trying not to laugh, Russell is just laughing, and Piastri and Norris have no idea what's going on. So yeah, good memories there. And the race itself, they just need to sort out the spray. It's becoming too much of an issue. We have no idea how the cars in 2026 are going to cope with it. Maybe you guys have insights on that, but you cannot be in a situation. Sorry.
I was just going to say the ground effect cars are the reason why we have so much spray.
Yeah, they are. That's what I'm saying, and it's not normal because you can see why we're not racing in them. When you look at the onboards, you genuinely cannot see anything. But there needs to be a solution. The wet races are what make classic races, and you can't have a situation where the best drivers in the world are begging to race and the actual authorities are saying no, let's not. So yeah, Nedzo, what do you think about what the hell they should do about this?
Well, obviously we're getting rid of ground effect next year, and that will solve a lot of problems, I believe, because the way ground effect cars work, we know from 1970s and 80s that it's not. I don't think the effect is as big or as exaggerated as it was back then, but essentially it just sucks air underneath the car and then chucks it out the back. And what does spray do? It chucks right up and it chucks it right up out of the back. It's the exact same thing. And it's just exaggerated by these ground effect cars. Luckily, as I said, next year it should be a little bit better. They've tried experimenting with mud flaps or wheel covers to try and reduce spray. And I don't think they've worked in testing and experimental work. But there are still solutions we can find. I do think the FIA, like, for example, I completely understand bringing the race or postponing the race for that initial bit, because I wasn't actually watching the race live. I watched it on a replay, so I missed a lot of the kind of a build-up action and all of that sort of stuff. But to me, it seemed like it was slightly too wet to go for the first time when they were supposed to go. But what they should have done is they should have had a standing start, and they should have had, or at least if not a standing start, they go round lap one and they say, actually, no, this is dry in some parts, so we need to go right now. But I don't know if it was because people like Lando were saying, "Oh no, let's continue a couple more laps," because it was clear that he was trying to be clever with the with leading as many laps as possible, or whether they were genuinely like fearful of liabilities and potential problems with the wet weather. I don't know, but I do think we need to get to a position where we can actually use wet weather tires, because we saw this year in Spa, we saw it last year in Brazil, where people just don't want to use the wet weather tyres. Even like, for example, in Brazil last year, it was fully wet conditions and Tsunoda was gaining, I think it was like 2 seconds per sector on the wet tyres. Yeah, people weren't changing, and then the red flag came out. It's a similar situation here, and I do think that we do need to get to a situation where F1 actually becomes like raceable again in these conditions, because we all know that wet weather races are equalizers. We've seen guys like Senna come through the pack in wet weather in bad cars. We've seen fantastic wet weather performances throughout Formula One history, and we're going to lose that from the fabric of the sport if every race is just held in the dry. And it's ridiculous. I don't think it should be like that. I understand the FIA are in a tough spot and they have to make a decision. They can't, especially at a track like Spa, when they've had so much backlash for fatal accidents and for serious accidents, that they don't want to take any unnecessary risks. But if you don't want to take any unnecessary risks, you might get to a point where you're just so not having coddled's the wrong word, but you're so hemmed in by your own problems that you're trying to make something that isn't going to happen. You're trying to avoid something that isn't going to happen, which is a massive crash or a massive problem. And I think that's the problem that we have with this race.
Well, actually, I went to the Goodwood Festival of Speed 2 weeks ago, and there was so many comments on how that's the only kind of events where you see the wet tires used anymore, because they use wet tires because they're slower and they're grippier. And it's so funny that 2 weeks later we get this event where actually we do see that wet tires are only used for show events and test show runs in the middle of cities. Obviously, that tire is not the issue, because people keep saying, "Oh, why are we not using the wet tire?" Obviously, I have no idea how you would make that tire to remove more spray. It's doing the work it should do. It's the ground effect that's the issue, but they just need to do something very, very quickly, because in 2026, when the new generation of cars gets underway, you're going to have all these young drivers who are yet to truly race in rain. And we remember in Sao Paulo last year, Behrman, how much he struggled in there when he's a very, very fast driver. And you can only think that this is an issue because he's not used to that.
Even this year at Australia, we saw so many rookies going off circuit in the wet weather conditions. I don't think it's that they don't race it, because obviously in junior series, this is weird. In Formula 2 and Formula 3, they seem to race in a lot worse conditions. Obviously, I think that's because the spray is less, the cars are smaller, everything is a little bit better in the lower formulas. It's F1's just in an impassable gully if they keep going down this route of, as I said, we're getting rid of a ground effect, but if they keep going down this route of cars that produce masses of spray, and then when we do get dry, it's to the point where you still can't overtake, because although they had DRS active, this is what we've had as a problem for like the last couple of years at tracks like Spa, at tracks like Monza. Some teams run the wings so skinny that the effect of DRS is just non-existent. So I've said this for a long while. They need some sort of gurney flap or a Hanford device that would essentially act as a parachute behind the back of a car, and then you actually get a slipstream effect. I know it would slow the cars down. I know it would kind of artificially improve the racing conducts, or the racing products. But I think that something natural like a gurney flap, a mandated gurney flap or something, would genuinely do good for the racing. The DRS can't do, because DRS is either too easy and you blast by halfway down the straight, or it's too hard and no one gets by the entire race. So something that actually works in a situation like this would be useful.
Regarding the original ground effect era, obviously back then attitudes towards safety were rather more lax than they are now. I'm trying to think if there are notable examples of very wet races in that period from 79 to 82 where they had issues of visibility. I mean, wet races in general aren't very common, but I'm trying to think of any really that took place in that period, and if this was an issue, anyone noticed this as an issue at the time.
79 to 82.
Because I mean, Monza 78. No, that wasn't wet, was it? No, that was dry. That was the traffic, the starting lights. Yeah, Canada. No, not Canada 80. I don't know. There must have been at least one wet race in that period, but I don't. If they were, it probably wasn't torrential. But I'm just wondering, because they used ground effect so much stronger back then. You think it would only amplify the issue? But I don't know. But next year with active aero, I feel like that might almost give sort of inconsistent spray if you've got wings adjusting themselves and flexing like through corners and all of that. I don't know, but it's also it seems to have been a general thing since 2015, basically since Bianchi, that we don't really get to race in the rain anymore. They just don't. You can't we can't ever have a wet race where we actually start on time and without a safety car start. They just don't let that happen anymore. There has to be some kind of delay and some kind of assessment, or they send those tractors round, which make no difference, or they send the medical car, and it's like, well, no, the fastest way to clear the water is to let 20 F1 cars go round, where each tyre, that's what, 80 tyres, each of which, it's what, 35 litres per second they can remove or something. That's how you do it. But they don't want to do that, and the thing with Bianchi is that Bianchi's fatal crash, that is the only fatal accident in Formula 1 that took place in rain. But it wasn't really because of the rain, it was because of that crane they left on the track. It's not...
I have another idea. Have a rain Formula 1 spec car or two. So when it rains, you do just send those two cars and you put like two really, really good, I don't know, old drivers in there. Something like an old Jensen and another person who you know is reliable enough, someone like Sergio Perez or something. And they just go around the track for like 10 laps. And that clears a bit because, as you said, you need the F1 cars are the best way to clear the track. So if you actually instead of sending the medical car, which is absolutely useless, I don't know why they do that. It's let's send this Mercedes or sometimes the Porsche. No, that's only the safety car.
Yesterday it was that Aston Martin SUV. It's like, that's just like a Formula 1 car, isn't it?
Send the Aston Martin DBX, and that's gonna tell you how to. I feel like they could have two cars just go round and round, so then actually people get entertained, and it actually serves a purpose. And I don't really see what would prevent that from happening if they just had two drivers like Bottas and Perez doing that.
It would be really interesting actually, because what you could have, it could be like a car built by the FA, like before the 22 season, they gave us that template of how the cars would look.
Yeah.
Use that, and you can, and then because then nobody can claim, oh, you're data gathering for one of the teams. Like, no, it's an FIA car. It's only used in the wet, and there's two drivers, and they drive, and they take turns running in front and behind one another, so they can test visibility and spray. Yeah. And they just give feedback. That might work, but of course,
I think that would work because you could just put two of the like very good drivers who are currently, when I say very good, relatively good drivers who are not in the field right now. And you know that they're reliable, and you just let them do their thing because that's how you actually clear the water. Waiting for the water to go down the drainage systems, which in some circuits is just really bad, that's not going to do anything. And they could be contracted, as you said, to the FIA, not to any team or any engine manufacturer.
Yeah. I mean, you could the drivers. You could have ones that are hired for it, or you could have the reserve drivers on rotation. So they just pick names from a hat. It's like, okay, it's you and you.
The reserve drivers. You would want drivers who can handle really, really, really wet conditions.
Yeah, or maybe experience. So yeah, like Bottas and Perez, and God forbid even Ricardo. Just people experienced drivers. That might. Yeah, it's just. I mean, it could be.
In theory, there is no issue with this.
No, I'm sure people
will find it. That they would never come up with.
Yeah. No, and it's also the kind of thing they probably decide it's too much effort or too expensive or there's too many things to consider. It's like there's nothing to consider because it's a safety car with front and rear wings. It's not there's no competitive thing. It's just a generic car, just drive and see how it goes. It's like it's a tire test. And another thing I think they should have, because they've done this before in the past, maybe during pre-season testing there needs to be a designated test session where the circuit is watered, I don't know what the word, like enough that they have to use the extreme wet tire. Because the other issue, and another reason people are hesitant to use it, is we have so little data on it because they don't ever let them use it. So people just don't know how it's going to respond. Whereas the Inter gets used reasonably frequently, but the wet tire, no one ever runs it, so they just don't know how it's going to go. And yeah, so maybe just have a wet session at the beginning of the season, and you can just many laps as you like on it.
Even at Goodwood, when the wet tires were run on this year's Haas, it was run by Gene Haas and Aya Okamatsu. So I'm not sure they got any data from that.
No, I mean, and also Behrman and Ocon were competing to try and turn the extreme wet into a soft tire. So they won't have got much data either.
To your point, to your earlier point about wet races during the ground effect era, I have a somewhat good list. Apparently 1979 South Africa, 1981 Brazil, and 1981 Canada.
Yes. So 79, that one, it shut it down at the beginning. They that was funny because they red flagged it, even though nobody had crashed, there were no problems, and then the rain stopped like 2 minutes after they red flagged it. And then I think they got going again very quickly because this is before we had that mandatory 10-minute wait garbage or whatever. The others though, Canada and that would have been Interlagos 81.
Yes.
Actually,
no, it would have been
Pagua. Yeah, because the 80 they did Interlagos. No, 1980.
It was the last year at Interlagos, 1980. It was on the old layout.
I thought they brought it back in 80 or 81 because they did a few years in Jacarapagua and then.
Jacarapagua was 1981 until 1989.
I'm being dense. Yeah, it was all through the 80s with Jacarapagua. Yeah. So there's a few examples, but those are not particularly notable races really for wet conditions or anything.
Yeah, Pete, it's a dense of you to not know whether Brazilian Grand Prix was hosted in the 80s. Get a grip.
Yes. Well, I only did a 2.5-hour video on every circuit in F1 history, so I should remember. But another part actually, because obviously whenever people think of rain, a lot of them think of Senna's drives in the wet and whatnot. Those tyres were really not very sophisticated compared to modern ones. It was quite basic tread patterns they had in their wet tyres. They looked more like the grooved tyres that we had in the noughties, to be honest. Whereas these ones, they are very intricate and sophisticated, and it's easy to say, well, the wet tyre just make the treads deeper, but it's not the wet tyre. It's not really the issue. And this again is another underlying thing about the modern regs not working and so many things just not getting thought through that it doesn't produce good racing. The cars are just annoying. And again, people don't hold the 20. There's not many good comments coming about the 26 regs either, because they're maybe being so specific and picky with how the cars are meant to work is not going to work, and give the engineers a bit more freedom to actually design something that, instead of adhering to regulations, is designed to be fast and drive well. Maybe that will help things. Rather than the front wing end plate has to be this high and then it can only be this way when you view it from a 30-degree angle, and you can't have, the rear front bit of the top end plate has to be 5 millimeters above the, I don't know. It's like, just let it go.
My general complaint about these car regs in general is the fact we're now back up to, we saw this, we got a lap record in sprint qualifying. We're now back up to the 2020 levels of downforce and in terms of speed. I'm always of the opinion that we shouldn't be setting new lap records in Formula One, and that we should always be about 5 to 10 seconds off of the lap records, because slower cars produce better racing. They do, because you have longer braking zones, you have all sorts of better car handling characteristics where, for example, the cars nowadays, they are pretty hard to drive nowadays, and that's not because they are death traps or because of whatever. It's because they're so fast, and if you are going to have some sort of issue or some sort of snap, it's not just going to, by the time you've had a chance to collect it up, you've traveled so much distance and had so much downforce on the car that you're already 100 meters down the road and already off into the gravel or already off into the grass. So I think they should go back to the kind of the same sort of speed that maybe the late skinny cars were, the ones at the towards the end of 2016, 2015 sort of thing, because those were pretty decent for racing. For example, even around Monaco, you saw some decent overtaking, and it wasn't impossible, but it was still hard. And that not just that, but also the aerodynamic efficiency of the cars. Because as I said earlier, it's impossible to overtake, because following in a slipstream, if you're following behind a car that has a really skinny rear wing, you're not getting by, because the cars, they are so aerodynamically efficient that you have maybe even with DRS, I think it was like a 12-kilometer-an-hour advantage. Even down the Kemmel Straight, you're not going to get by unless you're literally right up their arse from the moment you exit La Source.
Well, one important transition here is how much of not overtaking was actually due to the cars in Spa or due to Spa itself, because somehow Spa has started to become this DRS train fest, as we saw in the sprint race. And it's weird because Spa used to be this incredible place where lots of very nice overtakes happened at lots of different places. It's one of those few circuits where you get to have overtakes in Sector 1, obviously, Sector 3. And if you would get your odd Sector 2 overtakes every now and then in the twisty section, which we did see from Lewis in the wet. But yeah, it was surprising to me to look at the sprint and just see how much of a DRS train there was all along, spanning 10 positions.
All of the problems that can be attributed to that race pretty much can be attributed to DRS. DRS trains, obviously, the fault of DRS, because it means that everyone is stuck in limbo who's in that train. It also confines them to 2 places where you can overtake, which is the 2 DRS straights on going up to La Source and going up the straight into Les Combes. Like the reason why we don't see any, because don't get me wrong, the reason why the bus stop was changed in 2007 was to make it an overtaking zone, but there's no DRS zone into there. So the only memorable overtake I can remember going through Blanchimont and up to the bus stop is Verstappen on Nedzo in 2015, and there's probably been some others, and there's probably been some good battles through there. But that's the reason why there's no DRS zone, and you've got 2 DRS zones directly after it there, where if you overtake into the bus stop, you're just going to get re-overtaken. This is why DRS is a massive problem, because not only does it might increase overtaking overall, but it confines it to certain places on the circuit where you can't, like, for example, overtake into a corner before a long straight, because then you'll just get re-overtaken really easily. And I'm glad it's going for next year, because hopefully we can find a system where tracks are dynamic and inventive, and you don't just have the same places where you go for overtakes, and it's actually fun to watch. Spa's not the problem. It's just that the current regulations don't allow for good racing, and as I said, they need to create some sort of system where the cars can actually overtake each other when they can follow well, and they have good slipstream effects and that sort of stuff.
Considering how long we've had DRS, it surprises me that it took about 10 years before people started playing DRS chicken. Because that's the other thing. As well as people thinking, I won't pass here because there's a DRS zone coming up, is thinking, I will deliberately not pass here because I'll try and get them to pass me so that I can just then pass them again. And you see this at Jeddah, because Jeddah is one of the most poorly designed circuits ever, because it has two overtaking spots. But the first one is invalidated by the second one, and then the second one is so poorly designed that you basically can't make a legal overtake there because it's so narrow that it's there's never any consideration of attempting to pass anywhere else except on the first lap.
The reason why we didn't see DRS chicken for like 10 years was because, like, when it first came in, a lot of circuits only had 1 DRS zone, and even up until like Liberty came in, it was only 2 on pretty much every circuit, and usually they weren't on back-to-back straights. I think maybe Canada and maybe a couple of others are the only ones where they were back-to-back straights, and also
in Canada, you would see that happen, like that famous clip of Hamilton and Alonso, and they weren't the only ones to do it.
Yeah.
So I really agree with you. It's more the number of DRS zones.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Red Bull Ring, more than half the circuit is DRS zone. Like, it's 3 consecutive straights with DRS.
It's just, I can understand it needs to happen, because I'd much rather DRS overtakes than no overtakes at all. But as I said, but they should have come up. It's because F1 always tries to be different from every other motorsport. IndyCar has pushed to pass a system that's worked for however many years with energy deployment, and like what we had with curves, which was a fantastic little thing.
Yeah,
F1 has to be different and has to try and push the boat out with some system that has no connection to real life like road use, and just has to try and do it for, like, oh, look at us, we have a rear wing that opens, even though it has major flaws where it's either too easy, too hard, or it just doesn't work. So
it's also artificial. It goes against the sort of spirit, I guess, of racing, because, like, in the race they're showing highlights of DRS overtakes. It's like a DRS overtake is not a highlight.
Yeah,
like,
I fully agree with that. That's one of the most annoying things with the F1 replays at the moment. It's, oh, look at this overtake, and it's him going straight. It's not even moving. He's going straight, and the other driver in front is moving, then going back onto the racing.
Other than Hamilton at Sao Paulo 21, how often do we see overtakes without DRS in the dry? Like, we don't, almost never. But when you do, it actually means something.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not just, I press the overtake button. And
Alonso's 23 compilation at Aston Martin, there were quite a few there. But
well, I suppose on Hamilton in Bahrain is one, isn't it? And but it's like, oh, I just press the overtake button, and it's like playing F1 Manager, telling them, you overtake now. Okay, I overtake, and
yeah.
But this is the thing. When DRS first came in, it was to curb the kind of things that happened in Abu Dhabi 2010, for example, when Alonso couldn't pass Petrov despite being way faster in the corners, but not as fast on the straights. But now it's gotten to the point where it was meant so faster cars could pass slower cars without getting stuck. But now it's to the point where it's just, it's not faster cars. It's meant to actually just increase overtaking in general, which is similarly paced cars will just leapfrog each other, and they do, and it's annoying.
Kobe actually in 2010 had no problems overtaking people before DRS existed. Often in faster cars than him as well. It was
That's just because he was a bit kamikaze with that. And I do think drivers should. I mean, I'd love to say drivers should be more aggressive and should push for more overtakes. But the thing is, if you do that, the cars just fall to pieces. You can't make the only type of contact you can make nowadays is wheel to wheel, which is what Kobayashi ironically was quite good at because he was able to go tire to tire and not give anyone any damage.
Well, yeah, just more.
No, I was going to say this is a good time to say that I went to an event where there's another very stupid overtaking gimmick at the moment, and that's Formula E. So Formula E came to London this weekend, and if you're not aware, they have attack mode there, which sounds so gimmicky. At least they got rid of the fan boost because they used to have the fan boost, which was meant to help fans, have an impact on the race. And it was so stupid because I think Stoffel Van Dorn, for example, got fan boost in every single race he ever entered. Mm-hmm. So in the 4 seasons
the van boost.
Yeah, the van boost. I think Van Dorn got in every single race. De Vries would usually get it. And that's before De Vries was in Formula 1. Di Grassi would often get it because Brazilian fans. So it became really stupid because instead of being this boost that was maybe helping a driver make a comeback, it was just into the same drivers. But now they have attack mode. And attack mode is this thing where you take the outside line in a specific corner, you load up your attack mode, and then for 4 minutes, twice in the race, or I think it's 4-2-2, so 3 times in the race, you have basically 100% of the electric power and you go much faster. So somehow that attack mode that was very gimmicky and stupid really works. I don't see it happening in Formula 1. It would be extremely stupid. Yes, Nedzo?
I was just going to say, I actually really like that system because it's kind of like a Joker lap, except there's strategy involved. And I like that. Yes, it's a bit gimmicky, and yes, it's not towards a real fabric of proper old school racing. But at the end of the day, it's another bit of strategy, and anything that adds another bit of strategy, I like. This is why, like in IndyCar, you have 250 seconds worth of push to pass. If you use it all in the first 10 laps, you've used it all. You have no comeback. And if there's a late safety car, you're screwed. But if you save it and then you use it all right at the end, you've got an opportunity. I like any sort of thing that gives you strategy options, whether it be tires like in 2013 that just crumble, or whether it be the attack mode. I think attack mode is good. I don't think it should be introduced in Formula 1. Yeah. Although at some circuits, Joker laps like Monaco, Joker laps could be an interesting concept.
But that's why I don't like that. Actually, I like that the push to pass does that because you can just activate it and just close it whenever you want, right?
Yes, I believe.
Yeah, because attack mode, the issue is because it's in segments of 4-2-2. I think at the moment it's 4-4. Yeah. There could be what happened to Verlaine and Maxi Günther yesterday, where they activated their attack mode for 4 minutes, safety car 30 seconds later, and they've wasted all of it. And then, they're jeopardized because they're not going to have attack mode for 4 laps when others will have it for 4 laps. So yeah, it adds this. That's why it's a bit annoying in Formula E. The fact that if there's a safety car, you're bugged. If you you activated your attack mode, and then very quickly, just on the drivers, which may interest our podcast. Pascal Wehrlein is obviously still doing it. Stoffel Van Dorn, Lucas Di Grassi has completed every single race of Formula E since it started. He's so washed, but he's just staying there because he has become the face of Formula E, basically. Who else will be? Well,
yeah, I was going to say Jeff. Two-time champion.
Of course, Jean-Luc Vaillant and Sébastien Buemi. So yeah, Buemi, he started P19 and P3 out of nowhere. Wehrlein got messed up by attack mode. Van Dorn didn't have a good race, but it's interesting because you see these former F1 drivers have to adapt to this really weird style of racing where sometimes it's just in London, especially because it's at the Excel Centre, which is just a big convention centre, and they just cram a circuit inside. It's really a glorified karting circuit. Like I could see Nedzo just having a great time. It is just a karting circuit that they've made a bit wider, and that's where when you guys talk about drivers having to be more aggressive, Formula E you can be aggressive because the wheels are very far from the actual as they call it powertrain, So you can push people, and that's also what you sometimes see in Formula 2. The thing with Formula 1 is if you try to do that, one winglet comes off and you're done. Whereas in Formula E,
unless you're Lewis, and then the car gets faster.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But in Formula E, for example, Oliver Rowland, who's the champion this year, he lost his half his wing at the start of the race, and he just kept going for 10 laps, and then he eventually crashed because De Vries was being a terrorist with him. But yeah, it's a very interesting kind of racing because it's more aggressive. There's actually good jeopardy in place with the attack mode, and you can overtake in more interesting ways than a lot of racing series. So somehow, as stupid as Formula E can be, and as much as it's not growing, it makes for a decent fan experience.
Yeah, I mean, with Formula E, if you just want mindless entertainment and destruction, it's great for that, but it just doesn't have... Formula One, even if it's to the detriment of the racing, it carries a level of finesse and sophistication that you don't, and prestige you just don't really get from other series. But now they're sort of just... It's being regulated into oblivion. Because, I mean, the attack mode thing, that concept does have potential in Formula One, because it could be... As an example, at Barcelona, the escape road at turn 1, that could be how you activate it. Or there's the escape road at Variante della Roggia in Monza, where Leclerc pushed Lewis off one time. You could use...
Where it's interesting is you need to actually calculate where... Because if you use your attack mode and you come out in front of the car that was behind you, then that's full bonus. Because you just...
Well, that's the point with Formula E. It's always on the outside of hairpins, isn't it? You have to take a very wide line. So they would need to... Obviously, they would screw this up because they screw everything up in Formula One. They would have to find escape roads, because we have the ones you're designed to go through anyway if you run wide. They need to find an example of those where, okay, you're obviously not going to gain an advantage. Not like, Alonso Sochi 21 or whatever it was, or 22, when he just completely... 21 when he did that, or but like also even like the cones, the first chicane at Monza, because you have to weave slalom through those, something like that.
That's a perfect example of attack mode, the cones, actually.
Yeah, something like that. That does have potential, because then there is the same strategy of, you might deploy it, and then guess what? There's a safety car, and you're fucked. And that would be very interesting for if there's a battle. Lando and Oscar, for example, battling at the front. Each of them gets to pick when they do their attack mode, and even if they do it,
you can mess up attack mode. Like if you didn't go through the exact
boundaries of the zone properly.
So it works on like a transponder then, or something. I guess it must too. Yeah.
So it
just
could end up.
Palmer come back to F1, because he'll definitely not get any.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Like I'm sure Lando would miss one or two, and I'm not I'm not just bullying Lando here, but I think his fans do know that he would probably just miss one at some point, and it could change the outcome of the race.
He'll go for it and just hit the wall instead of going over the thing, or something like that. But it has potential, because again, it's finite, and obviously it's equal in that everyone gets 4 minutes and you have to use it twice a race. It's like, okay, it's not like you can just do it every single lap or whatever, because KERS was finite, but you had it every lap, so there was no variation, and you would see they use it in the same corners every single lap,
unless they need to. That's it.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
obviously
Alonso, a lot of his really, really good starts from 2011 to 13. It's really weird. I don't know why other drivers didn't do that, but he would deplete 3/4 of his KERS at the start. So he used it like a boost at the start of Mario Kart, basically. And that's what made him launch so much. And so many drivers kept it to defend further down. And it made no sense to me. Alonso was one of the only ones to use it at the start, which is where you should use it. And that's how we always made like 3 or 4 positions. Because yes, he's a good starter, but it's really compounded by the fact that he had the Renault launch control, and then for some reason, he was one of the only ones who, during the KERS era, actually used it as a bonus. Small thing, last thing about Formula E. Half the fans, so at least 70% of the fans, had Jaguar merge, and I could not make sense of it. There were so many Jaguar Ultras among the Formula E fans, and I'm like, you guys aren't fans because they won the Le Mans in the 1980s, and you're not fans because of the 1950s either. So why the hell is everyone supporting them? And then everyone who was supporting McLaren just had the McLaren F1.
Maybe they were selling merchandise.
I presume, but you mean the Jaguar F Formula E team, not like the HSBC Jag. Yeah. Who drives for them at the moment for Jag?
the two Kiwis, Mitch Evans, 2012 GP3 champion, and Nick Cassidy.
Yes. Okay, right.
So two very good drivers, but just it was really random because none of the other teams really had any kind of cheers.
Yeah.
But every time the Jaguars came through, people were cheering so loudly, and I was like, "Oh, they the McLaren of FE or something?" But yeah.
Maybe there was just a coach tour of Kiwis came to see it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really weird that
Everyone-
it's two Kiwis racing for Jaguars.
Yeah.
Because,
But yeah,
and they
one
are
final
good.
point. One final point on F1, and then we'll get back to Formula One.
Yeah.
How does Oliver Rowland get away with being fat and being champion? Like, I don't get it.
So
Everyone
it's
else
quite,
is. Yeah.
it's quite funny because people do call him the fat driver. It's one of the reasons why he cannot do endurance because, as you guys know, balance of performance works on more weight added to the car if the car is too fast. He is literally 15 to 20 kg. I think that's what I've read. I'm not fat shaming him, but I've read that he's 15 to 20 kg more than the average driver. So he would be the ballast in WEC. So that's why he's not one of these really good Formula E drivers who does WEC as well. And I think Formula E, surely the cars are heavy already because of the powertrains, and that's why it does not matter. That's the only sense I can make of it because electric cars are really fast, but they're all quite heavy. But yeah, he's very good.
It's weird though because every other driver is in amazing shape. Even like middle-aged endurance racing drivers are still reasonably trim, and he just gets away with being just fat.
Was Roland ever a Formula One test driver? No.
Yes,
he was. Yeah, he was a development driver for Williams. I think he did a couple. I think he's one of the ones that got sacrificed on the altar of Lance Stroll, along with Alex Lynn. Like they were set up for something, and then Stroll came in, and that put an end to that, or something.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because the drivers performing at the top of Formula E all have some pedigree. So at least you do see that there is some consistency. There's no one who's just really good in Formula E and has never been doing anything before. So that's good because at least racing is it makes sense in that.
Well, yeah, because I mean, Zane Maloney was good in the feeder series. Dan Ticktum was good in feeder series. Like all of the.
That's what I was going to say. Dan Ticktum, he got pole. He was so fast, and it was incredible because that's a man. I was telling my friend about it. He was meant to be in a Toro Rosso at some point if he wasn't in that case. So yeah.
Yeah, Red Bull are very good at that, aren't they? Like attracting these nutty drivers, and their career just dies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go back to Formula One. So yeah. So again, so we've seen the issue with the tires, but also we seem to have a serious problem with race control because I understand people's complaints about Michael Massey and his conduct, but his primary objective was we need to make this entertaining because it's a sport and it's a spectator sport. So even if he was being fast and loose with the rules, it was fun. Whereas this is, oh no, the rules say this. We're going to sit here and do nothing for ages and then just manufacture one of the worst races in the modern era out of it. Because we had, I mean, okay, we didn't need that delay at the start. It's the fact that they're anticipating rain. It's like, oh, let's just wait. It's like, or we start now and there's less, and then we've got rid of a lot of the water when it does hit, and then we just test it and see how it goes. And if we have to stop it, at least we've got in, 10 laps of racing or whatever. There's like, no, let's wait for ages. Oh, and then let's wait for the rain to stop. And then we'll wait another 10 minutes. And then they can have their 15-minute warning so that there's already a dry line appearing when we do 4 laps of safety car. Like, there doesn't need to be any lap safety car and then a rolling start. It's like, can you please stop treating the drivers like they're idiots? Like, they know what they're doing. They know how to drive in the wet. And just let them race.
I think it's stupid too. Personally, they just need to kind of streamline the entire process. I do think that they are kind of... I understand taking liabilities and taking concessions since Bianchi because you don't want you don't want to repeat because that was a driver error, and you don't want to... If some drivers
especially
are saying...
at Spa, I guess, especially at Spa where you are prone to very big crashes.
Yeah, but it was only a fatal accident because of the crane on the track. If that crane wasn't there, he would have just... Yeah, he'd have been fine. He'd have been out of the race, but he'd have been fine.
Yeah. This is the problem we have with modern F1. I'd say they do need to streamline the process a little bit. You see, I think I do understand kind of in preparation for inclement weather stopping races because NASCAR do that, for example. If there is lightning within 15 minutes, they stop the race. If there's any raindrops on a circuit on an oval, they will just stop the race before it gets there. So I can understand preemptive sort of measures, especially if it is like a big thunderstorm cloud coming towards the circuit, because they have to keep not just the drivers safe, but the fans safe as well. I'd say that, as I said, they do need to streamline it. So if we were going to get the race started, then they should have done it. But delaying it was fine. But they do need to, like, for example, the 10-minute warning that can easily be shrunk to a 5-minute warning. And then the 15-minute whatever to prepare the cars. Again, that can be streamlined. That can be gotten rid of immediately. Maybe make it so they just have to have the car prepared at any time to pretty much just go, or make it easier for them to do that, so they don't have to start the car from the back of the car and heat up the tires and get rid of the gazebo. Just make it a bit more plug in and play, I think, is what they need to do, because I know that'll just make it a lot easier. You get rid of 20 minutes from the equation, and then I'm sorry, but when parts of a track, it's not like, because we have had issues in Formula One with localized weather, where some parts of a track are flooded, some parts of a track are dry, or not to that extent, but that kind of thing. I would say personally that when the entire it was clear that the entire track was intermediate conditions. There were a few puddles, but unless you're trying to make an overtake, you don't go into them. So they should have just brought in the safety car at the end of lap one, because it was like, I know you want to have the driver's input because they know best at the end of the day, but it was clear that Lando, for example, was just trying to run the lap count down. We all saw that, and we were all clearly was clearly obvious that that was gonna be the case. And when it's intermediate, I think intermediate tires. I think when we're on, because I think there was a point in F1 where if you were on wet tires, it had to be a safety car start. And I think we should go back to that. If you're on wet tires, it has to be a safety car start. But if you're not, then it has to be a green flag start.
Yeah, I mean, that 10-minute rule is bullshit, because it doesn't take 10 minutes to put your helmet on and shove that doohickey up the car's arse and turn it on. Like, it just doesn't. And this was compounded even more in Austria, because, of course, we had Carlos stalling on the grid. And then he gets going just after they red flag it. And then it's like, oh, we've red flagged it, so now we have to sit here for 10 minutes. And it's like, yeah, but the problem's gone. Like, we only did that because his car wouldn't start. Well, it started, he's moving, everything's fine. Why do we need to sit here for 10 minutes doing absolutely nothing? Like, you just give them, like, okay, we're going in, we're good to go in, he's off in 1 minute, we start the formation lap again and go. It just doesn't.
You do sort of want them to kind of have provisions in place for them to say, for example, oh, it's not 10 minutes, it's 2 minutes because of a special circumstance.
What it needs, and I think race control, they need some kind of, maybe they already have this, I don't know, some override system where they can speak directly to every driver at once, so they get a direct line of communication instead of getting it through their race engineer.
I think they got rid of that direct driver and team lines after Abu Dhabi 21.
Yeah, no, that was between team principals. I mean just one that goes directly to the drivers, but the drivers can't respond. They're just, it's just like a, like a shout out, like a general, like a tannoy.
Formula E has that, don't they? Scott Elkin always talks to the drivers, don't they?
Well, yeah, just do that.
White as well. I think both Formula E and White have it.
Well, yeah, it's just something like that, and it's not like because obviously it's a one-way thing. So it's not like they say that and then suddenly all the drivers log on and start ranting at them all at once. It's like, no, it's just a general message for everyone, and it's just to get it to streamline things a bit better. But even like,
I was going to say, because in F1, like Scott Elkin will go full course yellow in 5, 4, 3, 2, and then he pulls out a safety car. So that would be good for F1. And also, so we could see the thought process of the FIA, because if we do get on the radio and they're like, oh, we're thinking of putting out a safety car, and it's like there's a car in the wall, just bring it out, then we can talk about how thick they are.
Yeah, I suppose if they start communicating, because obviously safety cars are red flags, the drivers respond immediately. That's not a problem, because they either get that on the dash or their race engineer tells them. If they start hearing race control thinking, is that a safety car? They're immediately going to be like, okay, they might build a safety car, so I'm going to do something for the next 30 seconds to try and I'll slow down so that I can pit immediately if they do, or whatever. You need a bit less of that. But like 3 weeks ago, Silverstone, of course, I was there, and yeah, it shat it down. And okay, that rain was very unpleasant because it was like I was completely exposed to it. But they brought the safety car out. Nobody had crashed, and they were all still on inters. It's like, what is the problem? If they were on wets and couldn't see anything, then yeah, but they're not even on the wet tyre. And is the rain really that bad if they're able to keep the car on track on intermediates?
Probably the rain isn't the issue, it's the visibility. And this is why they don't go on wet tyres, I think, because the spray would just be unmanageable. And that's the problem they have. And they should have fixed it by that point. They should have probably, I don't know, maybe fixed the issues with the spray before they made a tyre that was literally unable to be used in any condition in the suitable conditions.
Yeah,
but
I mean, It's them not thinking things through with regulations. I mean, they did that, wasn't it? Ferrari did that test at the beginning of the year where they put like mud flaps on the car.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, guess what? It's made it even worse because it just turbocharges the water directly at the driver's face. Because it lowered, instead of spraying just up everywhere, it's like, no, let's like a hose and just point it straight at them. That was kind of what it did instead.
Yeah, that's just
yeah. They just don't, so many things, they just don't think it through. It's either a stupid idea or it sounds like a good idea. And then within a matter of seconds, the teams have found loopholes that get around it and make it not work anymore. Like, maybe just stop regulating everything. Because that's the thing about, we have this mandated ground effect, which isn't even proper ground effect because they don't have the skirts and all the other stuff. The original ground effect wasn't mandated. It came about because Colin Chapman was smart enough to see, oh, if we put this on the car, it makes it faster. And then everyone else copied it, and then eventually they banned it. But it's like, it came about because there was the room for that kind of innovation. Whereas these days, if anyone comes up with anything clever, it just gets banned because it's not fair that one person thought of it and the other teams didn't. Just, there's so little freedom. Like, this is what I said in my manifesto. Like, you can have restrictions on the basic dimensions of the car, and you can put a weight limit in, and it has to have 4-wheel, well, maybe not even that. But otherwise, do whatever the fuck you want, as long as it still looks like a single-seater. Just go nuts and just do something interesting. It's just because again, this is another thing about the lack of overtaking is the gap is so small because Spa is the longest circuit on the calendar, and there was in qualifying the gap was about 1.8 seconds between the whole field, which is minuscule. Is that I think that's another reason overtaking doesn't happen so often because the cars are so similar on pace. We'll get more variation in just the field spread and also just the general driving characteristics of the cars, and all of that would make a difference of how they interact with each other. Because Mercedes for years would design their car to run at the front so that you couldn't overtake it, which is why they'd often then struggle when they fell behind. Yeah.
Well, you were talking about all these cars that should just let go nuts and all. I think that's a good point to start actually talking about the teams and how McLaren at the moment, well, they are very, very clear, and they set a new lap record, beating that famous W11's lap of Lewis in 2020. And I think you were saying earlier, before we recorded, they now have 6 lap records?
I think there's 4 or 5 circuits where I think it's about 6 or 7 where between them the McLarens and Max have the outright lap record from this year. So basically, that McLaren, it's on course to be the fastest Formula One car in history. We'll need to see what it does at Monza, I think, because Monza is where the W11 has the record. It has the highest average lap speed record in Formula One history as well. So it's a couple of circuits like that we'll see. But yeah, it's basically these are now the fastest cars we've had, or at least more specifically the McLaren is.
Well, somehow Lando did bottle something with that. And so yeah, to talk us through what happened with that start, because Piastri was instantly all over him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he said himself that he knew that was his only real chance, particularly with the conditions the way they were to get him. And he did come at the top of Radion. He came so close to hitting him. And he said he lifted off as little as possible just to get the slipstream. But that's the thing that's very confusing, because we saw it there and we saw it on the first lap of the sprint with Max passing Piastri, that slipstream was huge. And that was without DRS. And with DRS, it made almost no difference. And it's like, what's with that? That's weird.
It's because when you don't have DRS open, you have a massive rear wing and a massive way for the car behind to slipstream. When the DRS is open, you don't have that, because that's what happens with the DRS trains. And it's also just because, like, for example, Max had a low downforce setup in the sprint, but then didn't in the race.
Yes. That's the other point, is the people that wait for the wet setup basically got punished by them deliberately delaying to wait till the circuit was dry. But see, the thing about that is the person in front, if they're the leader, they don't have DRS because there's no one in front of them. So there's still this big wall of wing creating a slipstream for the person behind. So it should be even stronger because they then have the DRS open, less air resistance. It should be stronger. And it's not the most high altitude circuit in the world. So it's not like it's particularly thin air like you get at Mexico or like Kyalami or whatever. It's just a really odd effect, because again, we had this last year that Lewis, even though he was obviously faster than George, couldn't pass him, got the win anyway because of the disqualification. It's just funny, and you see them struggling at a corner where we saw Hakkinen passing Schumacher and a lapped car at the same time without DRS, and you're just like, what has happened to this sport? Like, it used to be a real sport.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that Max, who is probably one of the guys who thinks that the most on the grid, was so far back because he started fourth, and with an uncharacteristic mistake actually in quality.
Yeah, I mean, every so often he does those. I mean, he said after quali, didn't he, that he's fighting Leclerc in the race, which was true because the McLarens just disappeared. In the sprint, of course, they couldn't pass him, and he just about held on because of the low downforce setup and it was dry. But then in the race, and this is another thing about. It's funny that we say that Lando was counting the laps down. Is him doing that basically gave the win to Piastri because he ran out of time to catch him at the end. But even so, like he himself, he spent most of the race about 8 or 9 seconds behind. It was amplified by him pitting a lap later and having a slow pit stop. If he double stacked, he'd have lost a bit of time, but not nearly as much. But then he kept locking up at the end, and this is the thing: is that because there was a lot going on yesterday, and it seems on X that I kind of tapped into the way a lot of people were feeling because I made several kind of hit tweets regarding just the way the general race run, which was quite surprising to me. So I'd said, like, there's no excuse for red flagging a race when everyone is still at Inter's 1.2k likes. Let's see. Then we had Pirelli succeeding Bridgestone is one of the worst things to have happened to Formula One. That got 2k likes. We waited 90 minutes for that, 1.1k likes. And then, Lando's strategy would have worked if anyone other than Lando was doing it. 1.1k likes. And it seems like it was because he, as well as the track drying almost immediately, it meant that we got basically a very, it was one of the most video game races ever. Because in the games, if there's a safety car or a rain, the AI will all pit on the same lap and do the identical strategy. And we got everyone pitting within a 4-lap window. And then they're all on the same tyre except Lando. And everyone was thinking, oh, actually, this might work because the medium will not last that long. And it did last that long. And Lando was catching at the end, but still not enough because I think Piastri set his fastest laps in the last 3 laps or something.
Yeah, his 2 fastest laps were in the last 2 laps.
And it just meant that after everyone had pitted for slicks, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing, except the only overtakes we saw were outside the points where it doesn't matter. And the people that did pit, they made no inroads on anyone, even on much fresher tyres. And it's like we could, And you just look at it and think, if we had started on time, okay, there might have been a red flag in the bit when it was really heavy, but it could have been such a good race because we would have had the variable conditions. And at the tail end of the race, it probably would have been dry enough that people would have started pitting for slicks. And they just denied us that. And it's like, they'll look at the 98 race. It's like, it was chaotic, but no one died. And it's one of the best races of all time. And it shat it down the whole time. And it just,
What about one thing that baffled me that no one's really mentioned? You mentioned the strategy that everyone pitting within 4 laps. Is that teams, for some reason, I'm not sure if it's for every team, but definitely for McLaren, they don't want to double stack when it's the crossover in wet conditions, and it's stupid because they did this in Silverstone last year with Piastri, and they lost 18 seconds in 1 lap. Lando lost time this race because he was on the Inters for an extra lap. Why don't they double stack during the crossover? Because it's the crossover point. It's clear that the drivers are going to be one of them's going to be wrong. So why not just make it so the drivers at least have a fair opportunity? I don't see why they don't do that. And there are some issues. I mean, some drivers got really screwed over by their strategy choices. Hadjar was one of them. He was in the points, then he was out of the points.
Ocon was the last one to pit and came out 10 seconds in last.
Yeah. Although he didn't gain much in the dry, which I was surprised at because he's usually really good around Spa.
This is another general point that this lack of wet weather running is, as well as we don't have as well as not having data on the wet tire, and you getting rookie drivers who just don't know how to drive in the wet. Also, you get this generalized incompetence from the pit wall regarding strategy in the wet, and we saw this. I remember it was so frustrating. Zandvoort 23. When it shat it down on the first lap and 2 drivers pitted and the rest of them stayed out. They're like, it's dry at the moment. It's like, but you can see how fast the rain is coming in. It's a short lap. It won't be dry by the time you've gone round. And there's no people, they never seem to think in advance. They're like, oh, we'll pit now when it's a bit dry. We'll put the Inters on. It's like, but if you can see it shitting it down in a couple of minutes, you'll need to be on wet. So maybe just do that. And there were people because I remember George in that race was like, oh, I was forecast a podium, and he comes out and he's in 18th when he was in the top 3 at the start. because they just don't know what to do. And it's because they don't let them run in it anymore that people don't seem to be able to think how to do this. And that's half the reason that, like, obviously Senna was great in the wet, Lewis is great in the wet, Jensen was amazing in changeable conditions, because they drove in an era where they actually let them race in the wet. So they knew how to do it and they knew what to expect. And now nobody has a bloody clue what they're doing. And it feels like you need to put a line in the sand and say either we just, we don't give a shit about safety or whatever, and we don't delay it unless it's
Which won't happen.
unless it's like a blizzard, or we just put a line in the sand similar to ovals and say we never race in wet conditions. Just one of the two. Because at least if you, okay, obviously people won't like it, but if there's a new rule that there's no more wet racing, at least we know where we stand and we have our expectation that, okay, we're just not racing today, rather than let's sit here watching the screens for 2 hours wondering if this race is ever going to get going.
The only problem with that is the reason why they do that in NASCAR is because on ovals is because they're a bit more lax with their organisation. And for example, we've had NASCAR races run on the Monday, the Tuesday, even the Thursday after a race, or after a race was supposed to be done. F1 can't do that, I don't think, because it's an international sport and we have so many double and triple headers, and F1 just wouldn't do it because, oh, look, we always race on a Sunday, unless it's a Saturday because we're in a Middle Eastern country. We've been paid £1 billion to not race during Ramadan.
Yeah, or in the 50s and 60s, they had some races on Saturdays just because why the fuck not? I don't know. But back then, there were back then there were no rules. Like, literally the only rules of anything in like 1950 was the size of the engine.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could do literally anything you wanted, even regarding racing and car design. It was ridiculous. And they had, like, the South African Grand Prix used to be run on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's like, why would you do that? And also, that's 4 months before the next race. It was nuts. Because we have that, we have this with, we'll get to them at some point as well, Formula 2 and Formula 3, because they were racing this weekend. They end up having these enormous gaps between races at the end of the season because for some reason every single Middle Eastern race has to be on every calendar. So we have to wait 3 months between Qatar and Baku or whatever. It's like, or we could just end the season in Baku. But no, because we always have to have the Middle Eastern races, we hit these enormous gaps, and you end up forgetting, like, you forget who's fighting for the championship, who's even racing in Formula 2. It's easy to forget when you go that long between races. That's just another funny one.
I don't see why we don't just do all the races.
Yeah. Well, we looked at McLaren and Verstappen quickly. Tsunoda, he actually qualified very well for once. P7 or P6? 7. P7, but mostly only 4 tenths away from Verstappen, but that was Verstappen who made a mistake. Even if Verstappen hadn't made the mistake, it would have been only 6 tenths. So good from him, but then in the race, fell down the order.
Didn't he say, I think they put a new floor on his car, new suspension? They did something like that, which he said made the car much better for him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that helped, I think. But then he was another one. I've forgotten when he pitted, but obviously he pitted too late because he dropped from 7th to 12th after they pitted for slicks.
But the thing from Spa, we do need to say, usually Spa is one of the tracks where the Red Bull second driver does perform a bit better. It's more important to see how they do in the next few races because Spa for some reason just suits the car in general.
But they're one where the gap would have been big enough that they could have double stacked them, and they should have done that because and then he would have finished in the points, and they would have had their first double points finish since Bahrain, I think.
Yeah,
would have been something like that. Yeah, so that was just a bit tragic. Ferrari
drivers, everyone was raving about Lewis. And of course, I'm here to nuance that because he was starting P18. If you're starting in a Ferrari in P18, you would kind of expect it to go up quickly. And obviously, he made the overtakes very fast. But again, I'm a bit tired of praising these drivers who qualify very badly and then they come through the grid. And then everyone's like, oh my God, he's overtaken 10 drivers. Yes, it was in the rain and it was good overtakes, but people were going.
It was the Sergio Perez school of weekend conduct, basically. But it's I'm looking at this thinking, in what way was this a good weekend for him? Because he screwed up not only sprint qualifying, but actual qualifying. He got himself knocked out in Q1 both times, whereas Leclerc qualified up at the front in both of them. He charged through, but yes, he was one of the ones that went onto a wet setup. So guess what? Car on wet setup in the wet is faster than cars on dry setup in the wet.
With a good driver.
Yeah, a good driver, but also it's midfield cars because he made 5 overtakes, and then because he pitted first, that was enough to get him up to 7th. But then once he got to 7th, that was it. It was just locked in position, not being able to pass Albon. So it's like, for once, Ferrari did the strategy that they should do. And it's like, yeah, he had a car that was set up for the right conditions and then didn't work in the dry. But he only made those positions. If he'd qualified where he probably would have finished 4th or 5th. And he wouldn't have done anything all race. It would have just stayed in the same position.
Yeah. So, just everyone who was like, oh, yeah, Lewis is cooking, driver of the day. Yeah, he started P18 with terrible cars around him, especially when you see that his teammate was able to hold off Verstappen in third. So some nuance there, because it's really jarring to keep seeing this about good cars that start at the back.
I mean,
another tricky conditions, but
yeah. Another thing, it's the same with 21. They're like, oh, what an amazing drive. It's like, it's easy when you have a car which is already the fastest on the grid and then has that bullshit illegal engine that wouldn't blow up. And you had 2 goes to get up there because you had the sprint to gain half the positions, and then whatever. Another thing he did though, he posted this really cryptic thing on his Instagram story of like a burnt out matchstick, and the matchbox said 0808, and so people are thinking August 8th, and it seems like it means either he's planning to burn the Ferrari factory down on that day, or he's announcing his retirement. And I'm not sure what it is, because it's a burnt out matchstick and it's like the flame's gone out, it's time to call it quits. But I'm skeptical that he's retiring this early, because things are going going badly, but they're not going terribly. It's not like Damon Hill 1999 or whatever. Like, it's not, it could be worse. There's no reason to retire just yet.
Knowing Lewis, this burnt out candle will be some sort of symbol for environmental safety and being good to the environment.
Or something to do with Gaza, maybe, I don't know, or a new fashion line.
Might be just new merch. Honestly, it's terrible to say.
But also I'm just trying to think. Well, how do you a burnt matchstick? How does that match fashion? Unless it's like a dress made of matchsticks or something that like Lady Gaga would wear, or you'd see at the fucking Met Gala. I don't know. It's a random one. Yeah, I think it's high. The only reason I could think of that he would want to retire is that he has his other passion projects. He's decided that that needs to take over now, and he wants to do that.
So he's sort of kind of destroying his legacy by performing this badly.
Unless he thinks that's the reason, I don't know.
Because I kept seeing that at Spa he's only finished in the top 4 in the last 12 years, and everyone was like, just wait, and then obviously it happened.
Yeah, I think also, but this year, like people keep trying to pretend he's beating Leclerc, and Leclerc is getting annoyed, but I don't agree with Lewis, because Lewis has beaten him once in qualifying. He won the sprint race in China, but sprint races don't count. And like Leclerc has got 5 podiums now, and Lewis has none. So Leclerc is bodying him. Like, it's not. There's no contest between those two at the moment.
No, but you forget that Lewis has very bad luck in Formula One. So.
Oh yeah, his car. Yeah, he definitely has way more than only 12 mechanical failures from 370 starts or whatever. Yeah.
In the moving down to the midfield, not much to say other than Williams had 2 good qualies and 2 different sessions.
A weekend of 2 halves, because Albon. Well, no, Sainz was in the points in the sprint, wasn't he? But then Albon had a great race. Yeah, he held it in 6th, kept Lewis at bay. Sainz messed up quali, and then they pitted him at. He was one of the ones that pitted twice, and it didn't work, and he just went nowhere. So that didn't work. Mercedes, again, 2 halves, because Antonelli is just everything keeps going wrong for him, but then he screwed up qualifying twice himself. And George, was in 5th, or he finished 5th, didn't he? In the sprint, he was out of the points, I think. Something like that. But Antonelli again, pitted again, didn't work, didn't go anywhere. So he's now had, in the past 5 races, he scored once, and that was that podium in Canada. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, and none of it's for the most part, none of it's his fault. It's mechanical failures or him getting like taken out by other drivers. It's just really weird.
Austria and this qualifying session in Belgium.
Yeah, he had his points average has like halved in the past 3 races as well. It's not going brilliantly on that front. What are the other teams? Racing Bulls. So they've had the pace, and Lawson had a good. I mean, he matched his best ever result of 8th. So he had a reasonably good weekend. But then Hadjar was in the points with him again. He pitted too late. and ended up last, and then pitted again and was just even more last when he went on hards. I swear he was carrying damage because he was just slower than everyone, no matter what tyres he was on. And then he was the only driver that got lapped as well. So that was a bit of a train wreck for him, but for them it worked. Alpine, I mean, Colapinto was useless because of course he was, and Gasly did what he did in Silverstone because he kept that train behind him and he just about held on to 1 point, but then he didn't. The sprint, everything, he couldn't start the sprint. So he had a good weekend because if the car worked, he could have got points in both races. So they did their thing. Haas. So yeah, sprint was good, double points both. 11th and 12th quali for the main race, and then both of them, well, Ocon, they left it way too late to pit him because in that 4-lap window, he pitted on the 4th lap. And there was that weird...
Quali in sprint was more than good. Like, Ocon was setting purple sector ones with the setup, and he qualified 5th and 7th. I mean, that's unreal.
Yeah, the sprint was great. It was just in main quali. I think didn't Behrman get blocked by somebody in quali, or there was a point where it was Lewis's yellow flag where he almost got penalised again for that or something. That happened, but then I
wouldn't have been surprised if the FI executed him like they've pretty much tried to do in the past couple of races.
Yeah, they just kept doing that to him, and there was that moment just before Ocon pitted when it was going through Blanchimont. He was being passed by like 4 cars all at once or whatever, and it got a bit congested. But yeah, that was another thing is they left it so late to pit him. It's like everyone is just terrified of double stacks. It's like in rain you don't have a choice because the conditions change so fast, especially on such a long circuit as well.
You're just penalising a driver by like 10 seconds.
Yeah. And it's like you might lose, at best, you'll lose about 2 seconds double stacking. It really doesn't hold you up as much as you think it will. And you'll make that time up by being on the right tyre at the right time. So yeah, Haas, they messed that up, so they ended up both out of the points in the main race. Sauber, okay, the pace is there because Bortoletto made Q3. He got in the points. Hülkenberg, if he hadn't pitted again, he would have been in the points. But then he was fast when he pitted, but just couldn't overtake anyone. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot a bit there when they could have got their first double points since.
I do want to just quickly mention, what the hell do you think is going on with Nico Quali? Because he used to be so good in Quali.
And now he's dog shit. But
he's good in qualifying. He's just all over the place. Sometimes he's really good. Sometimes he's really shit. Sometimes he's in between. This is the problem with Hülkenberg because as much as like he had consistent years, 2014 comes to mind. He's also had really inconsistent years, and that's why he's never got a drive at a top team. Because in pure pace, at his peak, he's maybe not like Verstappen level, but he's definitely Norris, Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Russell, those kind of guys in terms of pace. But he's just all over the place. And while Leclerc or Russell would get second or third in every single race, 1 week Hülkenberg in those Mercedes or Ferraris, he'd be like second, third, 10th, 12th, 7th, 6th. He'd be all over the place.
Yeah, and obviously everyone famously knows how many potential podiums he's messed up. Yeah. Often of his own accord as well.
Nedzo is a good driver, but he's beating Nico badly right now in quality. I don't think anyone expected that.
I think people don't notice it much because Nico makes up for that in the races and keeps gaining enormous positions, except this time. If he just stayed out, he would have been 10th and they'd have got double points.
Yeah.
Then the other team is Aston Martin. I mean, they had...
Oh, well, them. They, just 2 minutes on that. They went for a wet setup for the main weekend. After in the sprint, it was really funny because in SQ1, Alonso was 4th. And we were like, oh my god, the upgrades are upgraded. And that was just because Alonso, he goes for his lap instantly. He's not one of those drivers who goes faster like Ocon. Ocon is the master of doing that. Alonso goes for his lap. So he was 4th, and people were like, oh, Aston Martin this weekend with the rain, Alonso's going to win the race. And obviously that didn't happen. They didn't even make it to SQ3. They go to quali. They go with a wet setup, knowing that nowadays wet races don't happen. 19th and 20th, half a second behind 18. And then during the race, they mess up stuff again. And it's like, that's where the issue is. Even if there's a rocket ship next year, there are too many stupid setup and strategy mistakes that mean if anyone thinks Alonso's winning a third title, that's not happening. He could win a race, and that would be the very best he could achieve. There's no way Aston are winning a title in the next few years, even with a good driver, because the core of the team in terms of strategy and setup and how to manage the races is rotten, and Spa showed it.
I mean, Alonso needs to stop listening to the team, and Stroll doesn't have a brain, so he'll just do whatever they say. But like, I think the race overall can only be considered a success, considering that they qualified on the back row to then finish 14th and 16th. It's like, well, 14th and 17th. It's like, well, you made some progress, I suppose. Like, yeah, that it'll do. They could have just been like kick Sauber last year or whatever. But there's not, individually, because so little happened in the rain, there's not much to say on everyone in that regard. But the thing is that we could have had good racing, but then it was kind of, in the case of Formula 2 and Formula 3, it was kind of a mix as well. Because the Formula 3 feature race in the morning got cancelled. I think the rain was a lot worse in the morning. But Formula 2, they raced, and the weather was obviously worse in their race, and they still did it. And someone won and then got penalised because it's Formula 2. So the race was utterly irrelevant, but there were at least cars driving in circles with water.
Someone won and got the 10-second penalty. P2, who then won, got disqualified. So P3.
It's just like it just doesn't. We don't need it anymore. There's no point watching it. Because it's like with that penalty, so he gets a 10-second penalty because he did the start procedure incorrectly or whatever. It's like, oh no, is that suddenly turned the car into a rocket ship? Like, if you can find evidence that the team has tampered with the car's ECU and that's why he was doing it differently, it's made it faster, sure. But no, just I don't know, pressing the wrong button at the wrong time. What possible advantage does that give you? Like, it doesn't. So why does that need to be penalised?
It was not an infringement that made him gain an advantage from what I saw. It was just as you said, issue mistake.
Yeah, but it's like that's the point. Is that he doesn't gain any advantage from it. It didn't change anything on the car. It didn't suddenly make it faster.
He drove a glorious wet Spa race that people were praising a lot, and the win gets stripped off just because of that. And that's why it's really bad, because it was one of the best feeder wet races that has been won in the last
and then to have Lindblad go as well, it's like, God, the stewards are just doing everything they can to give Vasseur the title, because he was useless all weekend, and now he's got some points out of it. But it is very close at the top. But like, basically the only standout this year is done, because the rest of them, if they're driving well, it's because they've already been there for like 10,000 years. So of course they're driving well, but he's a rookie. And I mean, he's been a bit kind of IRA coded with some of his actions at the beginning of the season, but like otherwise he's getting into a rhythm and actually doing pretty well.
I mean, he's still very IRA coded, but his pure pace is insane.
But he's entertaining, and he could be the first Irish F1 driver since Ralph Furman. And why not? Let's see what he can do. He's kind of come. He was quite anonymous before F2 as well. Like, he
was really known in GB3, but then Formula 3, for some reason, it didn't really work for him. But the reason it's worth talking about is that he could genuinely be a driver to consider for Cadillac, because you cannot have a Formula 2 rookie champion and no one takes it. That's impossible.
Well, we've had that before, because that seems to be that's the MO is if you win the title, as well as if you win any races, we'll disqualify you. If you win the title, you just don't get a seat next year anywhere.
I will just say, by the way, this title race is looking very 2010 F1 coded, except if the Red Bull was driven by Karthikeyan and Bruno Senna, the Ferrari was driven by Vitaly Petrov, and the McLaren was driven by Charles Pic and Jerome D'Ambrosio, because they are five drivers.
For sure. But Petrov is so clear of the other drivers you mentioned. So
yeah, I know he is. But there is 12 points between the top five, and that's Fornaroli, who's leading, then Vasseur, Crawford, Dunn, and Luke Browning, who I'm hoping gets it.
Yeah, so that's the thing is
Fornaroli's leading. No.
Yeah, Fornaroli's leading with his one win since 2021 in Junior Series.
If he goes Formula 3 and Formula 2 back to back with one win, it would be absolutely insane.
Bro, is Matt Crafton coded? No one will get
If they hadn't penalised what's his face Dunn, he'd be miles ahead in the championship now.
Yeah. Oh, he'd
as well.
Be 40 points ahead.
But it's still, from at least that perspective, is at least relatively close. But I feel like he's the only one. He's the only one that really deserves it, because the others, like Vasseur, doesn't count. And like Crawford's been there too long. Browning's too old. Marty's he's too far off. Marty. Fornaroli, I mean, okay, he's broken the curse, so he actually won. I mean, they're sprint races, but he's won some races. But he's not in any of the driver academies, and I'm not sure who would take him.
Well, that's perfect
of
for
that.
Cadillac, for example. That's perfect for
Yeah,
Cadillac.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think Cadillac should just take whoever's, whoever wins it, maybe.
For
Just
sure.
be fun, just be different. Anything but Bottas and Checo with Ricardo as your reserve driver. Like, if you do that, just you're worse than Haas. Like, just just go away.
To be honest, I wouldn't actually mind Bottas and Checo because it would solve a lot of debates about 2021 as to which car was faster out of the Red Bull and the Mercedes.
Yes, because that's how it works, Nedzo.
The battle of mid. It'd be interesting actually to see the two number 2 drivers being forced together as teammates. Like,
for example, obviously Ciaron isn't here, but 2014 shows via Alonso and Kimi that in 2005 McLaren were the fastest car by 4, and the Renault was shit. Obviously,
it had mine's gone blank. There was a point I was trying to make. I wanted to make ages ago, and I haven't said yet. And now I just can't remember what it was going to be because we covered all the teams. We ranted a lot about rain
and Formula 2. Formula 3
Formula
just
2.
not at the moment. So
I pay even less attention to Formula 3. Other than there's that giant Ugachukwu in it, which is like how he fits in those cars. I don't know.
Yeah,
he's like 6'7" or something. But I mean, Prema absolutely suck at the moment. It's him, Noel Leon, and someone else. I mean, no one's heard of half the F3 drivers, but it's not even who's leading the championship actually in F3.
No, Rafael Camara's leading by.
Him. Yeah, he's a Ferrari junior, isn't he? Oh, that's the other thing. Freddie Slater, he's been permanently bumped up to F3 because he did this weekend. And then he got like 4 penalties for track limits or something in one of the races.
Yeah, he's meant to be good. So
yeah, he's the one who he'll be in F1 in a few years. So he's one to keep an eye on. There's a fairly obvious trajectory with him. Him and Lindblad, it seems like, are the two to watch.
I mean, Lindblad, surely he is in Formula 1 next year.
Yeah, they'll have him next to. Well, yeah, he'll be in the Racing Bull with alongside who I don't know, but yeah. But that's another general point is that we saw we could have had a really Titanic battle for the lead for the win yesterday, but then it was decided on the first lap, and then Lando self-sabotaged first by trying to goad them into running more safety car laps, and then he kept locking up every time we tried to chase him down. And it's and this is why it's like 1996, where everyone knew that Schumacher was by far the best driver. He just didn't have the best car. Because Max is doing what drivers like him and what Senna did. If you think that 92 and 93 was when Senna put on some of his best drives and most memorable ones. And Max has been doing that this year as well with his pole positions out of nowhere in these wins, is that he's, really standing out at points. And the McLarens, it's just it's very methodical. Lando is just constantly self-sabotaging. Oscar, it's very easy to be just stone cold and emotionless when you don't have to do anything and you can just let your teammate wreck their own championship, because all you need to do is just drive and not think about anything. Like they haven't. The only time they've really fought on track is in Canada, and Lando crashed into him. Like, we haven't seen nearly as many battles as we saw with Hamilton and Rosberg or whatever.
But as you said, this McLaren could go down in history as one of the fastest cars ever, and that's what's mad. Because usually nearly every single iconic car has had an iconic driver. Maybe the Piastri will become a 4 or 5 time world champion, who knows? But at the moment, it's very much like the car will be iconic, but the drivers will be like, oh yeah, remember that Lando guy, and then Oscar won a title, I guess.
I think that's half the reason. The 96 Williams, it's it's a pretty car and it was fast, but it's it was Damon Hill and a rookie Villeneuve driving it, so that's why it doesn't stand out amongst the greats.
I've always said that the 96 and 97 Williams were just as good as the 1992 and 93 ones. It's just they had 2 mid drivers driving them in both seasons.
Yeah, and Schumacher was working overtime 96 it wasn't ready, but 97, he was doing everything he could to try and beat them in a car that was obviously worse. And the same in 98 and 99, the Ferrari was obviously worse, and he was still kind of performing magic with it. And those top drivers. Well, Oscar, I suppose, did the move, won the race, blah blah blah.
And then it's just a bunch of mid.
I mean,
there's no
I suppose. Leclerc is one of the worst wet weather drivers in Formula One history, and he still kept Max behind him. So that's something.
He had a good spa actually.
Yeah,
people
he
always
qualified
hate
well
him
and drove well.
for wet performances, which is fair, but he did well.
He passed Lando at the start of the sprint. He didn't hold him off for very long, but he did something. So he had a good weekend.
Albon was up there.
Yeah, Albon, he can have it. Straight line merchant, so yeah, why not?
I'll give it to Piastri, Leclerc, and just for the sake of it, I'm going to give it to Lewis Hamilton, who had such a good race.
Yeah.
I'll go for Piastri, and then I'll go for Albon, and then I'm going to go for Lawson because I think he did it.
Yeah, Lawson was silent but deadly. He had for him it was a good weekend. He's getting his confidence back. Flops, race control, the wet tire, the race control, the wet tire, and the FIA.
Same.
Yeah.
I'll go more on track stuff. I'll go for Aston Martin, Antonelli, and whatever happened to Isaac Hadjar.
It's even hard to say if it was the driver's fault. Some of these strategy decisions, it's like so much of it is down to the pit wall.
Yeah.
That I actually know Lando. Lando has to be in there.
Oh yeah, shit! I forgot about him.
Lose the lead and then lock up Lando. Can he can be one of those.
That's going to replace last lap Lando.
Yeah, it is. It already has.
Not to go back into it, but you guys realize there is genuinely a 45% chance Lando will be a world champion, even with all these mistakes that we've talked about.
Oscar need the retirement for that to happen.
I'm just looking. The thing is, I'm looking at the results, and I'm like, Oscar. Okay, there was that 9th place in Australia, but Oscar has been in the points in every single race. How is there only 16 points in it? Why is Lando so close to him? Because Oscar didn't he have 4 consecutive wins early in the season or something?
It's because of Australia. If it wasn't for Australia, Oscar would be 40 points ahead.
And again, the thing is,
Australia just add 10 points. You see,
the thing is, Australia. It was such a minor error, but even then, he managed to keep he both got the car going again and prevented a safety car. So he was actually quite clever about it. Whereas Lando would have just beached it and we're done. But other than that, he's never finished any lower than 4th, and he's still only 16 points ahead.
Yeah.
The problem is though, neither of them can string together more than about 3 races of really good performances. And with Lando, he will have 1 or 2, maybe 3 good races, and then he'll get a 4th or a 5th and drop a proper stinker. And they're not. But his Oscar stinkers will just be lower. I think he'll be like Prost versus Senna in 88 and 89, and I think that Oscar proved a bit a better driver in both seasons, just like Prost did in 88 and 89.
At the end of the season, I'll need to do the drop off thing and see if that changes the result. If we still had that system in place, if it would make any difference with those two. Because it literally, I mean, even Prost, because I went to Goodwood as well, and I was there when Prost was interviewed on the balcony by Karun Chandok, and he even mentioned this in a slightly passive aggressive way that I got more points than Senna, but because he got more wins, he gets the championship basically.
It was quite interesting because the champions, especially Mansell and Prost, they all went with a bit of a chip on the shoulder. You would think at that age, they're like, "Oh, hi, thanks for coming here. We really appreciate it." All of them were talking about their title years, and were like, Mansell was like, "Oh yeah, Prost used to beat me, but it was because of my weight." And then Prost was like, "Yeah, that's what you always said." And it was like genuine kind of still competitiveness, and they're like 70
Nav, you're very optimistic to assume that grumpy old men don't still have chips on their shoulders.
But yeah, it was just it was really nice as well because they'd got a batch of champions who all raced against each other in one way because they got Jackie and Emerson to talk about their rivalry, and it's like that was 50 years ago, and they're still
they did that.
They had them interviewed. They interviewed both of them together, and they were talking about what they're racing. And I was like, that was more than 50 years ago now, and they're still talking about it. And because he had
incredible, and he's the one who waved the flag yesterday. And I don't know if you guys saw the pic, but he was leaning onto the track with one arm, and the other arm he was waving.
Jackie X. Yeah, he did the Jackie Stewart and Emerson Fittipaldi. Yeah, because champions on the back of it. But X was there as well at Goodwood. I saw him. I didn't speak to him, but I saw he was there. There are so few drivers left in the 60s now.
And you realize how July is full of motorsport events. So people like Jackie Hicks and David Coulthard, they just go every single
place.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
David Coulthard was at Formula E yesterday, and I was like, I've seen you 3 times this month.
And he was at Goodwood 2 weeks ago, and that exactly. We need those voices because there are so. I mean, 1950. I think the only drivers still alive from the 1950s. It's like Hermano da Silva Ramos, AJ Foyt. There's like one other person. Sorry, Bernie Eccleston. Yeah, Bernie Eccleston as well. There's like 4, maybe 5 drivers at the most still alive from the 1950s. There's going to be more from the 1960s, but still not many. And Jackie Ickx is one of the. Him and Jackie Stewart are one of the few like race winners that are still alive. Like Jackie Oliver's still alive, I think, and Merzario was
alive.
No, he died about 20 years ago, I think. There's hardly anyone else still left from the 60s, and you kind of need. It's kind of great to hear from them, especially because we're going to go and seeing the cars in person. I was stood right next to it was the 1969 Ferrari with the V12, and they fired it up just for 10 minutes. And it like rumbles in your chest when you're stood like a few feet away from it. And it gives you a new appreciation because it's easy to dismiss those cars for being slower than the modern ones, but they're still just amazing pieces of kit.
Yes.
And still so powerful and just in a way that the hybrids just aren't. They just they're fast, but they sound like utter garbage.
Well, this is the thing. Whenever people on Twitter say, "Oh well, Fangio or Stewart or Clark could never drive a car from 2025," I always say, "Well, if Verstappen or Hamilton tried pushing a car from the 1950s or 60s, they would end up in a tree and dead." So
yeah, and because they've all received offers to drive those cars and they've said no because they look like death traps and that. But to be fair, I've never heard anything louder than the Streamliner. That Mercedes, that V10 or whatever it is, I could not believe it. I could hear something, and because everyone was crying around, I was like, "Oh, it's the Streamliner!" Like, holy shit! Like, yeah.
The number was that a 1950s Mercedes?
Yeah, the W196 because they had that there.
Is that not a 16-cylinder, or am I thinking of like an Auto Union or something?
I think Auto Union had 16.
I think it was either a V8 or a V10 in that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
but they had Auto Unions at Goodwood, and it was insane. I'm like, these cars were death traps.
Yeah.
Yes.
The 1930s cars more so than the 1950s ones because, like, I think the horsepower actually went down from the 1950s in the 1950s compared to
the engine regs, smaller engines. Yeah, they just and you see cars even in the 60s. There's a roll hoop, but the roll hoop is below the driver's head, so it's not actually going to help you, but it's just there for aesthetics or whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's going off topic a bit. But yeah, sometimes you need a bit of a palate cleanser like Goodwood to just remind you of how good motorsport can be, even when we have just shit stains like this weekend or whatever, and all that.
I wouldn't call this weekend a shit stain. I call it a pee stain. It's not as bad.
Yeah, just excessive. Just when you excessively regulate the sport, it just takes so much away from it, and they need to fix that. I think.
When's the next race?
Next weekend is Hungary, and then we have the summer break. So yeah, we had 3 weeks off for some reason, and then we have 2 races, and then 4 weeks off. But yeah, whatever.
Nice.
Zandvoort's on my birthday weekend. Yay!
Ah, nice. So Hungary. Okay, yeah, good circuit. Ironically enough, it will probably be more overtaking there than there was at Spa.
Yep.
It's a good circuit. Well, Lando likes it. Oscar won there last year. Yeah, we'll have to see.
In a non-controversial way, let me add.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess the championship it carries on, and I guess we'll just wait and see what happens there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. If you join the channel as a member, you can get early access to videos and behind the scenes content, and so join our other members as well. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Yeah.
You have to live a life. All the time you have to live a life.